listening to Rashkin Report. You're listening to WSUW 91.7 FM in Whitewater, Wisconsin, The Edge. This is Rashkin Report, and I'm your host, Yuri Rashkin. Joining me today is Ilya Ponomarev, former member of Russia's State Duma, practically a congressman, who is now a resident of Kiev, Ukraine. Ilya, who's joining us via Skype, welcome to the program.
Hello, Yuri, for having me.
Absolutely. Ilya, if you could please begin by sharing your opinion on the sanctions that have been passed by Congress that are going to affect, are they going to affect Russia? How painful is this going to be? What are your thoughts?
Surely they are going to affect Russia and Russian people. But firstly, just out of information, as you know, sanctions are divided into two parts. There are so-called personal sanctions and there are so-called sectoral or economic sanctions. And personal sanctions, they basically restrict movements and freeze assets of particular individuals which are linked to Putin's regime. And I think that those sanctions, they are effective, and I personally advocate that they would be widened and that there would be no cherry picking of particular individuals where the net is too loose, so to say, but that they would be more uniformly applied to the whole circle of Putin cronies and members of their families. That would be efficient because they all are serving in Russia, but their kids, their wives, their lovers, their friends and relatives, they all are living abroad. They prefer to study abroad. They prefer to have vacations in Miami, and you are targeting one particular crook which is next to Putin. He's maybe suffering temporarily inside Russia, but gets benefited with new government procurements and with career promotions, while all his family is enjoying itself here in the United States or in Europe. And so I think that it has to be more coherent, and that those sanctions have to be widened. But speaking about economic sanctions and sectoral sanctions, I think that they generally are working counterproductively, because they just help Vladimir Putin to say to Russians that it's not our fault that you are so poor, that it's not my government which doesn't know how to drive the national economy, but it's bloody Americans. It's he was saying bloody Obama, now he will be saying bloody Trump, which are our native enemies. And that's what I was been telling you all the time, that NATO and the United States is something that we need to fight with. And all ordinary Russians, they basically when they're looking at their personal wallets, they are getting confirmation that this is the case, and that in general, yes, America is our enemy, which I think would be a mistake, because the message should be the opposite. The true enemies of Russian people are those who are in Kremlin, those who are in Moscow, and not those who are in Washington, D.C.
So do you feel that the sanctions are going to make any sort of a change of regime less likely because people are going to rally around Putin? Or is there a chance that people are going to look at the situation and say, well, this is not working for me, and get more politically involved?
Economic sanctions, unfortunately, yes, they are rather solidifying the regime. They are solidifying the popular support rather than disrupting it. And we see many examples in history, like the most obvious one is the one with Iran. where sanctions were there for very long period of time, like 40 years or more, and they didn't produce any substantial result in terms of regime change. I think what is effective is the pressure on the elites, and maybe in rather long term than short term, those economic sanctions, because they obviously they result in economic stagnation in Russia, not in economic decline, but stagnation. That this stagnation would lead eventually to tiredness of the elites. But this is a very slow and painful way, and I think that for ordinary Russians, it's rather bad and inefficient way how to achieve the change.
Ilya, you were a member of State Duma, but now you live in Kiev. You have a really unique position in Russian politics because you're a technology entrepreneur. You've been active since your teenage years, really. Can you talk a little bit for the audience about what brought you from Moscow to now that you're in Kiev, and how safe do you feel in Kiev considering political assassinations that are taking place not just in Russia or London, but Ukraine?
How I ended up being here is I voted in 2014 against the war in Ukraine. And after that, it was an order of Vladimir Putin, who said that I should be, as he said, neutralized. And they decided that the best way to neutralize me would be to keep us out of the country. When I was on a business trip in 2014, in August 2014, they issued a court order that restricted me from crossing Russian border so that I could not return back home. And at the time, they froze all my accounts and suspended all my assets. So basically, out of luck, I was at that time in the United States, and despite that, I had like literally $20 in my pocket, but I had some friends who helped me to survive, and I stayed in the United States for some year and a half, advising technology companies and living in the Bay Area and in Silicon Valley. But I always wanted to be more efficient politically, and that's why I decided to go to Ukraine. And as soon as I was able to sustain my living, I have done exactly that and went to Kiev, and that's where I live right now, and working on U.S.-Ukrainian relations, U.S.-Russian relations, and doing investment projects in Ukraine, because what I think will affect the situation in Russia most is the economic success and social success of Ukraine. People should see that the result of revolution that happened in Ukraine in 2014 is prosperity of Ukrainian people, and if we will do the similar change in Russia, then eventually it will lead to prosperity among Russians as well. So I think that this is what we need to do.
Well, living well is the best revenge. How do you feel Ukraine is doing?
Ukraine is obviously in post-revolutionary chaos, and it's a very dynamic country with a very dynamic and developed civil society. Not very good quality of ruling elites. Unfortunately, they are changing, but it's a slow and painful process. Corruption is still pretty visible, although it's not that bad as many media likes to say. It's even Russian media, they're trying to overemphasize this.
So is Ukraine,
to my mind,
so would you say that Ukraine is less corrupt than Russia, or is Ukraine less corrupt than people think?
Ukraine is less corrupt than people think.
Okay.
It is corrupt. Ukraine and Russia, they are corrupt in different fashions. In Russia, corruption is basically a way to run the country. It's a conscious vertical of power that has been created by Putin. So corruption there is very orderly. In Ukraine, corruption is like sand in the cogs. It's very chaotic, as everything here. So here, corruption is really sabotaging the development of the country, but it's also disrupting any attempts by some of politicians to solidify the power in their personal interests. So basically, in a sense, corruption in Ukraine helps democratic development of the country, because nobody can monopolize the levers of power. At the end of the day, I think it's less disruptive, but unfortunately, it's also prevents from doing positive changes in terms of reforms. It's very hard to pass necessary legislation through the parliament. It's hard to make necessary government decisions. In a sense, Ukraine is like a dream of a libertarian, because the government is nowhere.
I will remind listeners that you're listening and watching Rashkin Report. This is 91.7 FM, WSUW, The Edge in Whitewater, Wisconsin, Rashkin Report. And this is Yuri Rashkin. My guest today is Ilya Ponomarev, former member of State Duma in Russia. Ilya, the other thing that I would love it if you could explain briefly, and I don't know if such thing is possible, Russia is, as a country, has a lot of political movements, a few, and even when we look in the United States, we can say that Utah Democrats are not the same as New York Democrats. But Russian progressives versus American progressives, or Russian conservatives versus American, it's such a fascinating upside-down view on things of who is considered progressive where. But you were involved actively. You were a member of Communist Party. And you felt that was, and you're at the same time a person you've been all over the world, and you felt that was a way to make a difference in Russia. Can you explain how what are your how that fits into your political view?
I am myself. I classify as a left libertarian type person. I am more an anarchist in terms of my political beliefs. And in the United States, I tend to team with left liberals, with people like Bernie Sanders or Howard Dean or Noam Chomsky. Those are the people who are the closest to my personal political position. In Russia, at one moment in time, the Communist Party, which is not exactly a communist for a very long period of time already, but they retain the name. At one moment of time, the Communist Party tend to be the assembly point of all different leftists in Russia, and at a later point, it was another political party created, which was called Fair Russia or a Just Russia, and officially it was announced like a social democratic political party. In fact, also it was a very wide leftist coalition from leftist liberals, leftist centrists to labor unions and to left radical groups on the streets. And as soon as the organization was created, I took part in the formation of that political movement and was elected from that party to the national parliament, and was there for almost 10 years representing Novosibirsk, the capital of Siberia. So, to my mind, Russia in general is a very left-oriented country. The values of social justice, the values of humans as the ultimate value is something which is embedded in Russian soul. Unfortunately, our governments usually are quite the opposite. And during the Soviet era, the understanding of solidarity and the level of trust between people were significantly destroyed. And that prevents very much from formation of real working people's coalitions and social movements. Basically, we have to recreate everything from the scratch. And additionally, do you see me? Or is,
nope, I
like,
do not have a video right now. That's okay. Oh, there it is.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. And the values of solidarity and the understanding how social movement can work, it has to be rebuilt from the very beginning, and that's a problem. Plus, the Soviet ancestry significantly discredited even words, leftist, socialist, even the word social, and that allows our neoliberals to manipulate the society for already 25 years. They are masquerading themselves under different disguises, but they continue the same policies, and that started in 1991, and that continues throughout all Yeltsin and Putin eras. It has never changed, but I think it would be changed inevitably, and with my comrades, I think that we will be in the forefront of that change.
Ilya, in conclusion, what do you hope will occur in Russia in the next 5 years? Kind of like if you were hoping for something, what would you hope that would be?
I think that it's almost for sure that within these 5 years it would be a revolution, and the regime will fundamentally change. I don't know how that would happen, and nobody can start the revolution. People can start a coup, but they cannot start a revolution. A revolution would start by itself, but we can influence the nature of that revolution, and we can, of course, design the power that would come to replace the existing one. And that's what I'm working very actively right now, and I think that learning by the experience of Ukraine is very fruitful, and I think that Russian diaspora, which is unfortunately rapidly growing in different parts of the world, because a lot of people currently flee in Russia, and these are the most talented and bright individuals, but they will collect the knowledge and the experience from Europe and from the United States and from other parts of the world, and I think they will definitely come back, and they will be the people who will build new order in the new Russia.
Ilya Ponomarev, thank you so much for being on our program.
Thanks for having me.
You're listening to Rashkin Report.